Most people are using OpenArt the wrong way. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how to create ultra-realistic images step by step. By the end of this masterclass, you'll know which settings actually matter, which ones don't, and how to build consistent AI characters that look natural every time. This is the exact workflow I use to get clean professional results inside OpenArt. Let's start by taking a quick look at the new OpenArt suite and where everything is located. When you first log into OpenArt, you may land on the previous interface. OpenArt is currently transitioning to the new suite experience, and right now you can switch between both versions. At the top of the screen, you'll see a link to the OpenArt suite. Go ahead and click that to move into the new workspace. Once inside the suite, you'll arrive at the main creation hub. This is where you can quickly start new projects using story, image, video, character, or audio. Across the center, these tiles are your primary starting points. Most of your work in the new suite begins right here. In the next step, I'll show you exactly how to create your first high-quality image using the OpenArt suite. Now that we're inside the Create Image screen, this is where the real generation process begins. On the left side, you'll see the main prompt box. This is where you describe exactly what you want OpenArt to create. We'll take a deeper look at prompt strategy a little later. The open area on the right is where your generated images will appear. For this example, I'm going to enter a fresh prompt so you can see the full process from start to finish. Before we generate, let's quickly look at the key settings on the lower left panel. First is the model selection. This controls the overall style and quality of the image. Different models can produce very different results, so for beginners, starting with the default model is usually the safest choice. Next is the output size. Here you can choose your aspect ratio depending on where you plan to use the image. For example, square for social media, or widescreen for video. You can also choose the resolution, including 2K or 4K. Higher resolutions produce more detail, but they may take longer to generate and will typically use more credits. You can also choose how many images to generate at once, typically between 1 and 4. Keep in mind that each additional image will increase the total credit cost for that generation. However, creating multiple images can be helpful when you want to compare variations and quickly choose the strongest result. For beginners, starting with 1 or 2 images is usually the most cost-efficient approach. It's important to pay attention to the credit cost displayed near the Generate button. The amount can change depending on the resolution you choose and the model you're using. Some models are more resource-intensive than others, which means they cost more per generation. Once your prompt and settings look good, and you're comfortable with the credit cost, click Generate to create your image. If you generate more than one image at a time, you'll often notice that each result can look noticeably different, even when using the exact same prompt and settings. You can see the images generated on the right. Depending on the model and resolution you choose, generation can sometimes take a few minutes. Now that you've seen how to create an image, the real skill comes from how you write your prompts. Small changes in wording can dramatically change the final result, even when you're using the exact same model and settings. What many beginners do is use very short or vague descriptions, and that usually leads to images that look generic or inconsistent. In this next section, I'll show you how to make your prompts more descriptive so OpenArt can produce much stronger results. Before generating, it's always a good habit to quickly check your settings in the lower left panel. For example, you might only want one image, but it could still be set to 4 from a previous session. Or you may be creating something for Instagram while your aspect ratio is still set to widescreen. Taking just a few seconds to confirm your settings can save credits and prevent surprises. To show you how much prompt structure matters, let's start with a very simple version of this prompt. Here's an example of a basic description many beginners might use. Now we'll generate this version so you can see the result. Now let's improve the same idea using our structured prompt framework. Instead of a short description, we'll clearly define the subject, the action, the location, the composition, the visual style, and the camera details. Once the structured prompt is ready, we'll generate again and compare the results side by side. You can see here on the right, both images were generated from the same core idea, but notice how different they can look. Even when using a well-written prompt, AI image generation still includes an element of variation. Things like framing, subject position, lighting balance, and background details can shift from one generation to the next. This is completely normal, and it's actually one of the strengths of OpenArt. By generating multiple images, you give yourself options to choose the composition that best fits your project. For example, one image may have stronger lighting, while another may have better subject placement or storytelling. This is why many creators will generate 2 or even 4 images at a time, not because the prompt failed, but because they're selecting the best creative result. In the next section, I'll show you how to refine your prompt to get even more consistent outputs. Now that you've seen how results can vary, let's improve consistency with a simple refinement pass. Notice I'm keeping the core idea the same. We're not starting over. What we're doing is adding clarity. For example, I'll strengthen the description by specifying golden hour lighting, reinforcing natural skin tones, and adding sharp focus on the subject. Even small wording improvements can guide the model much more effectively. You don't fix prompts by making them longer, you fix them by making them clearer. So in this refinement, I'm tightening the subject description, confirming the environment, and reinforcing the photographic style. Once the updated prompt looks good, we'll generate again and compare the results. This is where you'll usually start to see noticeably stronger consistency. Now that we have the refined images, let's compare them side by side with the original results. On the left, you'll see what we got from the simpler prompt. On the right is the refined version. Notice how the refined prompt delivers more consistent framing, better lighting balance, and a clearer subject focus. The environment feels more intentional, and the overall image has a more professional feel. This is the power of refining prompts. Small, clear adjustments guide the model toward more reliable, high-quality results. In the next section, we'll refine even further for even more control. Now that you've seen how refinement improves consistency, let's talk about taking control even further. At this stage, most of the gains come from making small, intentional adjustments rather than adding large amounts of new text. One effective approach is to strengthen the parts of the prompt that matter most for your specific goal. For example, if realism is your priority, you might reinforce lighting quality, natural skin tones, or photographic detail. If composition needs improvement, you can be more specific about camera angle, subject placement, or framing distance. The key is to make one focus change at a time, then generate and evaluate the result. This step-by-step approach makes it much easier to understand what is actually improving your images. As you continue working in OpenArt, you'll develop a feel for which parts of your prompt have the biggest visual impact. In the next section, we'll look at a few common mistakes beginners make and how to avoid them, too. Before we go further, let's quickly cover a few common mistakes that many beginners run into when using OpenArt. The first mistake is using prompts that are too short or too vague. When the description lacks detail, the model has to guess more about what you want, which often leads to inconsistent or generic-looking results. The second common mistake is changing too many things at once. If you adjust the model, the prompt, the resolution, and the image count all at the same time, it becomes very difficult to tell what actually improved the image. A better approach is to make one small change, generate again, and then evaluate the difference. Another issue to watch for is forgetting to check your settings before generating. Sometimes the image count may still be set higher than you intended, or the aspect ratio may not match your final use, like Instagram versus widescreen. Taking a quick second to confirm your settings can save both time and credits. And finally, many beginners assume that every generation should look identical. In reality, some variation is normal, even with a well-written prompt. The goal isn't perfect duplication, it's consistent, high-quality results you can choose from. In the next section, I'll show you how to build a repeatable workflow so you can get strong results more consistently. As you continue creating inside OpenArt, your generation history will start to fill up quickly. So let me show you a few tools that make it much easier to stay organized. At the top left, you'll see generation history. This drop-down lets you switch between images you've generated and assets you've uploaded. This becomes especially helpful once you begin working with reference images or larger projects. Now moving to the top right, here you can switch between image, video, and audio history. This allows you to quickly filter by the type of content you've created. Right next to that is the star icon. You can favorite any generation by clicking the small star directly on the image thumbnail. Once you've starred an image, simply click the star icon at the top right, and OpenArt will display only your favorited results. This is extremely useful when your library starts getting crowded and you want to quickly find your best images. Next is the filter panel. Here you can narrow your results by date range, by tool type, or even by the specific model you used, such as Nano Banana, Seedream, Flux, and others. This becomes very powerful when you're comparing results across different models. Next to the star filter is View Mode. Here you can adjust the thumbnail size using the slider, which helps when you want either a broader overview or a closer look at your images. You can also switch between cropped thumbnails and full image view, depending on how much of the frame you want to preview. This is a small setting, but it makes browsing large projects much easier. And finally, on the far right, you have the search bar. This lets you quickly locate past generations using keywords, which can save a huge amount of time as your project history grows. Learning to use these controls early will make your workflow much smoother as you create more inside OpenArt. In the next section, we'll continue building your repeatable workflow. Now that you've seen how the individual pieces work, let's talk about building a simple, repeatable workflow inside OpenArt. Having a consistent process will save you time, reduce wasted credits, and help you get better results faster. Here's the basic flow I recommend. First, start with a clear but simple prompt that captures your core idea. Don't try to perfect everything on the first pass. The goal is to establish a solid foundation. Next, generate a small batch of images. I usually recommend starting with 1 or 2 images so you can evaluate quickly without burning through credits. At this stage, you're looking for overall direction, not perfection. Once you see the results, review them carefully. Look at the subject clarity, the lighting, and the composition. If something feels off, make one focused refinement to your prompt. Then generate again and compare. As you begin getting stronger results, this is where favorites become very useful. Star the images that are closest to your goal so you can easily track what's working. Over time, this simple loop, prompt, generate, review, refine, becomes very fast and very powerful. And once you get comfortable with it, you'll be able to produce high-quality images much more consistently inside OpenArt. In the next section, we'll look at a few tips to help you push image quality even further. At this point, your results should already be improving. But there are a few simple quality boosters that can make a noticeable difference in your final images. First, pay close attention to your lighting descriptions. Lighting is one of the strongest signals you can give the model. Phrases like golden hour, soft, natural light, or dramatic rim lighting can significantly improve realism and depth. If an image ever feels flat, lighting is usually the first thing to strengthen. Second, be intentional with your camera language. Specifying details like medium shot, close-up, or shallow depth of field helps OpenArt frame the scene more consistently. Think of your prompt not just as a description, but as directing a camera. Third, watch your resolution and image count settings. Higher resolution can improve fine detail, but it also increases credit usage and generation time. Starting smaller while you refine is often more efficient. And finally, generate in small batches and compare your results carefully. Often the best improvements come from small, deliberate refinements rather than major prompt changes. If you follow these habits consistently, you'll notice your images becoming more reliable and more professional over time. In the next section, we'll look at how to start pushing into more creative and advanced generations. Now, before we move on, there's one optional setting worth mentioning. On the image creation panel, you may notice a feature called auto polish. When this is turned on, OpenArt automatically enhances your prompt behind the scenes. This can sometimes improve results, especially for beginners. Personally, I usually leave this off so I have full manual control. But it's a helpful option depending on your workflow. All right, now let's take a closer look at one of our results. When you click on any thumbnail, OpenArt opens the detailed image panel. At the top, you can see the original prompt that was used to create the image. Just below that, if auto polish or prompt enhancement is enabled, you'll also see the enhanced version of the prompt. This is extremely useful for learning and for refining future generations. Along the right side, you'll notice several one-click action buttons. You can recreate the image to generate a new version using the same prompt, upscale to increase resolution and detail, or send the image directly to video for animation. You also have options to use the image as a reference, create variations, change the camera angle, or jump into the full image editor. This panel is where OpenArt becomes very powerful because it lets you iterate quickly without starting over. At this stage, your images should already be looking much stronger. But if you want more consistent results across multiple generations, there are a few advanced habits that can help. First, try to keep your core subject description stable between generations. In other words, avoid constantly rewriting the main idea of your prompt. When the subject stays consistent, the model has a much easier time producing reliable results. Think of your prompt like a set of instructions. Small refinements work better than frequent major changes. Second, reinforce the elements that matter most for your goal. If realism is important, continue strengthening your lighting, environment, and photographic language. If composition is the priority, focus more on camera framing and subject placement. The more intentional your wording becomes, the more predictable your outputs will be. Another helpful habit is generating in small batches and reviewing carefully. Rather than generating large numbers of images at once, Work in controlled steps so you can clearly see what each refinement is doing. This not only improves quality, it also helps manage credit usage more efficiently. And finally, make use of your favorites as you refine. When you spot an image that's close to your goal, star it and use it as your visual reference point moving forward. Over time, this builds a very efficient creative loop inside OpenArt. In the next section, we'll start exploring how to expand beyond images and begin working with OpenArt's video capabilities. Up to this point, we've been focused on generating and refining high-quality images. Now let's take a look at how OpenArt extends these capabilities into video creation. Inside the suite, video generation follows many of the same principles you've already learned: clear prompts, controlled refinement, and intentional iteration. To get started, we'll move to the video creation area. Here you can generate motion directly from prompts, or in some cases build from existing visual concepts. The important thing to understand is that strong video results still begin with strong visual direction. This is one reason why building consistent images first can be so valuable. When your subject, lighting, and composition are clearly defined, it becomes much easier to guide motion in a predictable way. Now, video generation does require a bit more processing time and typically uses more credits than standard image creation. So just like before, it's a good habit to review your settings and generate in small controlled steps. In the next section, we'll walk through a simple example so you can see how video generation works inside OpenArt. Let's walk through a simple video generation so you can see how this works inside OpenArt. Here in the video creation area, the process will feel familiar. Just like with images, everything begins with a clear prompt describing the motion or scene you want to create. For this example, we'll keep things simple and build from a clean visual concept. I'll enter a short motion-focused prompt so you can see the full process from start to finish. Before generating, take a quick moment to review your settings. Video generation typically uses more credits and can take longer to process than standard images. Starting with shorter clips and controlled settings is usually the best approach while you're learning. Once everything looks good, we'll click Generate and let OpenArt process the video. Now we'll give the system a moment to render. Depending on the model and settings you're using, this can take a little longer than image generation. And here's our first video result. Notice how the motion follows the general direction we described in the prompt. From here, the same refinement mindset applies. Small adjustments to your prompt can help improve motion consistency and visual quality. In the next section, we'll look at a few tips to help you get better motion results more reliably. Now that you've seen a basic video generation, let's talk about how to improve motion quality. Just like with images, most of the gains come from making small, intentional adjustments rather than completely rewriting your prompt. First, be clear about the type of motion you want. Instead of vague phrases, try to describe movement in simple, natural terms. For example, gentle water movement, slow camera push, or subtle character motion. Clear motion language helps OpenArt produce smoother and more believable results. Second, keep your scenes controlled while you're learning. Very complex motion or crowded scenes can sometimes produce less predictable results. Starting with simpler compositions usually gives you cleaner motion and makes it easier to refine. Another helpful tip is to generate shorter clips first. Shorter videos render faster, use fewer credits, and allow you to evaluate motion quality more quickly before committing to longer generations. And just like with images, review your results carefully. Look for smooth motion, stable subject positioning, and natural-looking movement. If something feels off, make one small prompt adjustment and generate again. Over time, these small refinements will help you produce more consistent and more professional-looking video results inside OpenArt. In the next section, we'll wrap everything together and review the full workflow from start to finish. Now you've seen the complete OpenArt suite workflow from start to finish. We began inside the dashboard, moved into image creation, refined our prompts for better results, and then brought those images to life with video generation. Along the way, you learned how small prompt improvements can dramatically improve quality and how important it is to keep an eye on your settings and credit usage. At this point, you have everything you need to start creating high-quality AI images and videos inside OpenArt Suite. My recommendation is simple. Start small, experiment often, and refine your prompts as you go. That's where the real quality gains happen. If this walkthrough helped you understand the new Suite workflow, you're already ahead of most users still trying to figure out the updated interface. In the next videos in this series, we'll go deeper into advanced prompting strategies, more cinematic video techniques, and workflow shortcuts that can save you both time and credits. Until then, jump in, start creating, and I'll see you in the next lesson. If this walkthrough helped you, consider subscribing for the rest of the OpenArt series.